Hi, in this lesson, we're going to look at how we can map through objects in arrays in our programs. Let's get started. An object, or a dictionary as they are also called, is a collection of key value pairs. We write objects inside curly braces with key value pairs noted with a colon and commas between each entry. Here we have an object called friend_info that contains 3 key value pairs. An important thing to note about objects is that they do not retain original ordering. So in order to access the value of a specific item in the object, you use the key, not the location in the object, as we would with an array. Objects can also be placed inside arrays to store multiple pieces of information. Here we have 2 objects stored inside a list called friend_info, which contains the first name, last name, and age of 2 friends. Let's see how to access each piece of information. We can access items in the list by using indexing and the key. For example, here, if we wanted to print the last name of the first friend in our friend_info list, we would write this.state.friend_info 0.lastname. To get the first name or age of the first object, we would use the same syntax with the new key. If we wanted to print a list of all of the friends in this array, though, this would quickly become a very long program. Thankfully, there is a method that we can use to shorten this process and our code. The map method allows us to run through an array and apply the same styling to the information stored in the keys of each object. For example, in the code shown here, the friend_info list is being mapped through. The same styling applied to the first entry would be applied to the second, giving the output shown here. And if we added a new object to the friend_info list, when we run the program now, we see that the entry is added without adding any new components to our render function. Let's take a deeper look at the syntax of the map function. The first thing we need to note is where we are calling our array. We call the list by writing this.state.listName as usual, but then we tack on the .map method. Inside the map method, we add a parameter. This parameter is actually any word we want to use and does not match any names in our actual list. So where do we use this parameter name? We use the parameter name given to call each item found inside our objects. When calling the keys in our objects, we write parameter name.keyname. Depending on the iteration of the map method, a different value for last name will be accessed, as shown here. On the first run through, Jones is used as last name, on the second, Lee is used, and on the third, Fraser is used. This applies for all object values accessed in the map method. Let's take a look at this method in action in the code editor. This app keeps track of guests invited to a party and their RSVP status. We already have the layout of our components, as well as our list of objects saved inside the guest list array. You'll note that each object in the list is surrounded by curly braces and separated by a comma, and that all items inside each object are separated by a comma. The first entry in my list contains the title for each column in my table. Let's use the information stored here to title our columns. I want to access the list number of the first object in the guest list here. So I'll write this.state.guestlist at 0 and get the list number key. Let's run that. Perfect. Now my number column is titled. Inside here, I want to have the last name, so I'll use this.state.guestlist at 0.lastname, and I want to have a comma, and then I'm going to place the first name of the guest. Let's see how that looks. Perfect. Last but not least, I need to label the RSVP column. Awesome. But I want to use the map function so that I can add all of the information from my list to my app at once. Outside of my guest list container, I'm going to add the map function. So I'll write this.state.guestlist dot map guest, and I want to close these parentheses after I run through my entire guest list. I'm also going to need to close the curly brace that opened up here. Now I'll change this.state.guestlist0.listNumber to just guest.listNumber because that's the parameter I'm using here. I can add that in all of these spots, which will really simplify my code here. And let's run it. Awesome, I have all of my guests laid out. Now it's your turn to use objects and mapping in your programs.